So now that I'm not choking on almonds, we can go talk about how things change during relative exercise, relative and absolute exercise, because those are very popular questions. So first we have to define what relative and absolute mean. So first let's just define relative. And really these terms kind of say what they are in the term. But a relative means it's relative to the same exact intensity. So an example would be, say you go out and you run at 70% of your heart rate, or 70% of your VO2. So say you just go out there all of a sudden today and you run at 70% of your VO2. You know what 70% of VO2 is. You have treadmills, all that stuff. You can calculate this intensity, but you just go out and run this intensity. And this intensity sucks, it's hard. But then say after you run the intensity, you decide to get serious and train for 6 months. So you decide, and then you train for 6 months. So you have a period of training. And then again, you run at 70% of your VO2. Now, we know after training, we're in much better shape. Hopefully that was the point of training, to get in better shape. But you're still running at 70% of your VO2. So now, how do all of these values change? Your heart rate, your stroke volume, your cardiac output. Those are the main values in your VO2. Those are the main values. And how do those change? Well, the most important thing to notice is this is at the same intensity. So whenever you think relative, just think same intensity. Now, you're in much better shape, yes, because you did train for 6 months, but you're still at 70% of your VO2, which is the same exact intensity regardless. Well, yeah, same intensity. It's the same intensity, but it's a higher workload. It's hopefully after training, your VO2 is higher, a little bit higher, point of training, but it's still 70% of your VO2. So same intensity, higher workload. So since it's the same intensity, your heart rate is actually the same. The reason it's the same is, now entering an important concept to get through, is that your body is not smart enough to know what's going on outside. Your body only knows what's going on inside. It only responds to how hard your heart is working, whether you have certain hormones and ions and whatnot in your blood, like lactic acid, oxygen, carbon dioxide, heat. So it doesn't technically know when you're exercising. Like, it can't see what you're doing outside. Like if you're sitting here looking at a pool or whatever, or you're jogging or jumping, it doesn't know you're jumping and jogging or whatever. It just responds to what the heart is doing. It responds to the inside factors, the inside environment. So this is why your heart rate is the same, because your heart is perceiving it as the same intensity. It's perceiving it as 70% of your VO2. Even though you're in much better shape, even though your VO2 is higher, it's still perceiving it as the same intensity. So your heart is going to work the same exact way because it thinks it's the same intensity. Now your heart thinks it's the same intensity, but you know you're in much better shape, so your VO2 is indeed higher. So thus your stroke volume is higher. It's because after you train for 6 months and you run at the same intensity of VO2, you're much stronger. Your VO2 is higher, so that same intensity is greater. Same intensity, same heart rate, but since it's a greater intensity, your stroke volume has to be higher in order to supply that increased intensity, or that increased workload. So your stroke volume is higher. Stroke volume is higher because you're in much better shape, so its heart is pumping out more blood. Your heart's working the same exact way, it's being the same, but it's pumping out more blood. So since your stroke volume is higher, your cardiac output is higher. Remember the formula: heart rate times stroke volume. Stroke volume is increasing, cardiac output is increasing. And this is also the point of training. The point of training, and the reason why your 70% of your VO2 is now higher than pre-6 months ago 70% of your VO2, or pre-training VO2, is because your cardiac output increased. Now, VO2 is kind of easy to see what that does. That will increase. And then your cardiac output is increasing, so your VO2 has to increase. But also, the point of training, remember, was to increase your VO2. If your VO2 didn't increase, then that's kind of pointless. What was the point of training? Because you're running at 70% of your VO2, train for 6 months, and then again you ran at 70% of your VO2. So your VO2 increased. Now, let's make it a little more real and plug in, well, we'll do that later. But your VO2 increased. Now, your mean arterial pressure is the same. Again, don't have a conceptual reason, just memorize that. Mean arterial pressure is the same. Rate pressure product, or the indirect oxygen on the heart, or how hard the heart is working, the stress of the heart is the same. Reason being, heart rate is the same, so your heart is working the same, because your heart, remember, thinks it's the same intensity. Your heart perceives it as the same. PNS and SNS remain the same. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use some numbers to make this a little bit more real, because numbers always make everything better. Okay, so say I just decide to go run and I'm not in shape, and I run at 70% of my VO2. Well, since I'm out of shape, my VO2 is 40. So 70% of 40 will be 7 times 4, whatever, will be 28. So I'm running at 28% of my VO2. And then I decide to get in shape. So this is my pre-training level. And then I decide to train, decide to get serious, whatnot. I want to go to the Olympics. So I train for 6 months. Although 6 months is not enough time to go to the Olympics. But I decided to train for 6 months and think I can cram it into 6 months. So I train for 6 months. Now my VO2 increases to 45, which is actually a reasonable increase after 6 months. Now, if your VO2 is already 70 and already high, increases are harder. As you know, anything in life, once you reach a certain level, it's harder to start seeing results. But a VO2 of 40 is kind of low, so it's kind of easy to see results. So I trained for 6 months. Now my VO2 is 45. And now I still train at 70% of my VO2. But now 70% of this, I can't do this math, but it's 4.5 times 7. So now let's just say now 70% is 30. Probably not 30, so don't correct me and say I'm wrong. But it's higher. Same intensity, higher VO2. Now, since it's the same intensity, still 70%, my body perceives it as the same. Because I'm still working on the same intensity. So my body thinks it's the same, so my heart rate does not change. But of course, I know it's a higher intensity. It's 30 VO2 now compared to 28. So something's making me in much better shape. Since my heart rate is staying the same, my stroke volume must be increasing in order to supply more blood to my organs and thus make me able to withstand this 30 VO2. Since my stroke volume is increasing, my cardiac output has to increase because I am in better shape. It is a higher workload, but same intensity. Since my cardiac output is increasing, my VO2 is increasing, which we can see right here, my VO2 increased. And my rate pressure product, the stress on my heart, or the indirect, how much oxygen my heart is using, is the same. Reason being, because my heart rate is the same, my heart perceives it as the same intensity. So it thinks it has, well, it doesn't think. It works the same amount, even though it's higher workload. So it's going to use the same amount of oxygen. And then my mean arterial pressure is the same. Can't really explain why that's the same, but it's the same. I guess because the heart is being the same, so systolic blood pressure is the same. I don't know. But mean arterial pressure is the same. And at this point, parasympathetic and sympathetic is really the same. No one really cares about parasympathetic when you're exercising. There is no parasympathetic when you're exercising anyways. And my sympathetic is the same also. So, this is all relative exercise. The next video will be absolute.